to have any real inkling of a South African. It was in the late 1960s, as I mentioned before, that I first read the work of the many brilliant South African writers of that period. Peter Abraham's Mind Boy was a revelation in my teens, and there were so many others that came later and afterwards became part of my work and my life. Words is also my profession, and it's what has brought me here. Although it is perhaps not completely the case to say that words is my profession, because words are largely a means of articulating our reflections, are not an end in themselves. That articulation is what I mean by literature, an activity which is both the story and something beyond the story. So now I will speak briefly about that and its importance in our lives. What is important about literature? Let me say to begin with that the person who asks what is the point of literature is not going to be satisfied with whatever answer you give him or her. That person has not considered how vital story, song, and dance are, and have always been, to the very existence of a human community. Not as ornaments or distraction, but as the acts that enable empathy and solidarity and self-recognition in a coeval atmosphere. First of all, literature gives us pleasure, a profound pleasure, which is not about making us smile or lighter of heart, but a pleasure which engages us and broadens our minds. If we do not feel this pleasure in reading a book or listening to an oration, we stop and put the book away, or we switch off and stop listening. Secondly, literature brings us news. It tells us about matters we did not know, or from a perspective we had not considered before. That is what I had in mind when I mentioned a moment ago that it was words that gave me an inkling of South African realities. When I say news, I do not simply mean facts and information, but something that forces an engagement to the point of anguish. A text that always comes to mind for me in this respect is Alexander Solzhenitsyn, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Even if you had known something about the labor camps and the prison system in the Soviet Union, this text forces you into a deep and felt awareness of the brutal assault on the human spirit that incarceration in the Gulag meant. When you learn that the prisoners are marched out of the labor camp to the day's worksite in temperatures of minus 48 degrees centigrade, imagination almost fails because such knowledge is beyond your experience. Yet you learn that people endure even against such ordeals. The literature also tells us about what we do know. It reassures us that our understanding of the world is shared, that how we feel is also felt by others. In other words, it reassures us about our humanity. I mentioned a while ago the great excitement of the decolonizing years of the 1960s, and since then many nations have gained their freedom from overbearing European power. Not everything has turned out well, and what we have come to understand is that the consequences of colonialism are still with us. European colonialism in Africa and elsewhere did not come in only one form, and its consequences are various, both historically and in the contemporary world. Most colonial activity in Africa was brutal and extractive, with predictable results in economic and political instability. Its legacy continues today in the impossible civil societies that are post-colonial nations, with their divisions and oppositions, and the widespread deprivation that often results in warfare and irresolvable contention. Since no one is willing to give up an inch of territory, or can only do so in bad faith and violence, Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, DRC, to name current crises, there is no option but to continue in hope that patience and resolution will enable a better future. Every age believes that it lives in tumultuous times. And our age is troubled by political uncertainties and environmental danger. I started by referring to the words of the brief the Mandela Foundation presented to me as part of their invitation to give this address, realizing our shared humanity. I will end with these following wise words, which were also part of that brief. I quote, "We live in a world in which global politics is a major issue in our lives and will continue to be as we grow ever more connected to each other. Not only does what happens beyond the borders of our respective countries affect us in economic, social, and even emotional ways, but international dynamics are also evolving as the global order is being reimagined and reorganized." Thank you very much.
Visuals there from the annual 22nd Nelson Mandela Lecture that is currently underway at the University of Witwatersrand right here in Johannesburg. And on the podium, Abdulrazak Gurnah there addressing those in attendance.